All right, here we go. Hey, everybody. I am Chad, aka the chap from Cardboard of the Rings, and I'm joined by a very good friend, Morten.
Hello?
Hi, Morten. And Morten and I were talking about how we have noticed there's a lot of new players coming into the game that have a lot of rules questions because this game, well, it's got a lot of rules. Okay, so first we want to talk about some common rules questions we get and mistakes people make, and maybe they don't realize they're making that mistake. And one of the first ones is skipping the quest phase. A lot of times people think they can just skip the quest phase and therefore not reveal a card so they can focus on combat. You can't do that. Every round there is a quest phase. So if you commit 0 characters to the quest, you still reveal a card, you still total up the threat, and you compare it to your willpower, which is 0, and you would raise your threat by the difference. So do not skip the quest phase. Morton, would you like to explain what the unique symbol means?
Okay, we can use Steward of Gondor as an example. If you look at Steward of Gondor, you will see a dot in front of the name of the card, Steward of Gondor. That dot indicates that Steward of Gondor is a unique card, which means that there can only be one copy in play. If you compare it to self-preservation, for example, there's no dot there, so that means you can have as many copies in play as you have in your deck. But for Steward of Gondor, there can only be one. And when you look at all of your heroes, you will see the unique symbol in front of them. And the unique symbol is also on some allies, such as Gandalf, for example, which means that there can only be one Gandalf in play each round. So even though multiple decks in a multiplayer game can have Gandalf, only one Gandalf can be in play at a time.
Yep.
And this also creates the unique situation that if you have a character who both has an ally version and a hero version, if there is one version of a unique card in play, then no other version can enter play. So that's something to keep in mind when you bring your deck to a multiplayer event.
Yep. And when you're deck building, because there's multiple versions of Gandalf, for example, you still only can have 3 different copies of Gandalf in your deck. So you can't have 3 core set Gandalfs and 3 Gandalfs from Overhill, Underhill. You can only have 3 copies of a card by name in your deck. A 0 cost card still needs a sphere match, and I have Spirit and I have Tactics. So even though this costs 0, I cannot play this card because I do not have a leadership hero to play this leadership card. The last thing we wanted to talk about that is a rule question that gets asked all the time is what to do when you're given a choice with a encounter card. For example, this card, Stricken Dumb from the Black Riders, says you must either shuffle the top card of the burden deck into the encounter deck and reveal an additional card, or raise each player's threat by 3 and immediately end the quest phase. Do not resolve the quest. And what I've seen happen is people, when they maybe are in the travel phase and they have to reveal a card to travel somewhere, if they revealed this, they will choose option 2 because they don't need to end the quest phase because they're not in the quest phase. So it doesn't hit them as bad. It's only a 3 threat. But the problem is since you're not in the quest phase, you can't even choose that choice because you can't fully complete it. You would have to choose the first choice. So when you're given a choice between 2 things and it says you must either, whichever one you can completely fulfill, that's the one you have to do. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create a video that goes through an entire round where we go over each action window and where you are exactly in the round. So we're going to have the round sequence off on the side here, and we're going to be showing you where you are in the round, what's happening at that moment. So we might as well get started. So the very first thing you do when you're setting up a game is you shuffle your deck. So I'm going to do that right now. So I got my 50 cards here, and I'm going to shuffle them. Boop. And then you're going to build the encounter deck from the different encounter sets indicated on the quest cards. We're going to be playing Journey Along to Anduin. So you can see here on the quest card, there are 4 symbols in the middle right. What you do is you look through all your encounter cards and you pull out any cards that have one of these 4 symbols. So these are the 4 encounter sets that you'll be using to play the quest. And each quest has different encounter sets you use. So you would shuffle all those together. You're going to determine the first player. It's going to be me in this case. You're going to place your heroes and set the initial threat levels. So in my case, I have 9 plus 9 plus 9. So my threat is right here, 27. Morten, what's your threat?
It's 8 plus 8 plus 10, so 26.
Very good. And it's at this moment that you would do any setup effects on your heroes. So for example, these 3 heroes each have setup effects. Denethor, you would add 2 resources to his resource pool.
For Eowyn, you would reduce your threat by 3.
Yep, that's nice. And then for Thurindir, his is a little tricky. You would search your deck for a side quest and add it to your hand. Then you'd shuffle your deck. So you would actually pull a card out of your deck before you draw your opening hand, making your deck only 49 cards to draw from. So a little bit of deck thinning right off the get-go. Nice. Then you're supposed to set up the token bank, which is literally just put all your tokens off to the side so you can easily grab them. And if you're wondering why we're not using physical cards, well, we have somewhat of a logistics issue where Morten lives in Europe and I live in North America, so playing an actual physical game, it's a little tricky. And then you draw your starting hand of 6 cards. So here are my 6 cards. There's Morten's hand. All right. And then you're going to set the quest cards. So you put the quest cards down, and then you follow the scenario setup instructions. So you follow any instructions on quest card 1A. This says each player reveals 1 card from the top of the encounter deck and adds it to the staging area. So we're each going to reveal a card, and we have Eleanor added to the table. She has an interesting ability, and this is going to be one of the first things we talk about when we're discussing action windows. She has a response. Responses happen outside of action windows. You don't need an action window to trigger a response. A response happens in response to something within the game happening. So her response is exhaust Eleanor to cancel the when revealed effects of a treachery card just revealed by the encounter deck. Then we discard that card and we replace it with the next card from the encounter deck. So during the setup portion of the game, if you have Eleanor on the table, you can cancel a treachery. So let's see what our first card is. It's a treachery!
Massing at Night says when revealed, reveal X additional cards from the encounter deck. X is the number of players in the game. So this is not ideal as a first card.
So if we had Eleanor on the table, we could exhaust her, discard that card, and reveal a different one. Oh, great. It's surges. Surges do happen during the setup portion of the game because we revealed this card. So we have to reveal another card anyway. Oh, fantastic. It's a 5-threat location. All right, so all those cards were just for my 1 card I'm revealing to start the game. Here's Morten's card. What did you get, Morten?
The Dol Guldur Orcs. When revealed, the first player chooses 1 character currently committed to a quest. Deal 2 damage to that character. But luckily, no characters are committed to a quest yet, so that one whiffs.
That's great. So we did add a whopping 8 threat to the staging area. Not good. All right, so we have done the setup on 1A. You advance to 1B. And it says, when revealed, search the encounter deck for 1 hill troll, add it to the staging area, then shuffle the deck. All right, we have done that. We now have the hill troll. So this is the startup of the game. We have 4 cards in the staging area already. We can't defeat the stage if the hill troll's in play. All right, so moving on. We move on to the actual first round. So the first thing that happens in the round is the resource phase. As you can see from the round sequence, you start out, each player simultaneously adds 1 resource to each of his heroes' resource pools. So we will do that now. After collecting your resources, each player will draw a card. So we will do that now. There we go. And then you can see by the green line, we have something that's called player actions or an action window. This is when you're allowed to take actions that include hero actions, events, and cards that have actions that are specific to the phase you are in. We have a card here called Captain's Wisdom, and it has a resource action. So this is going to be one of the first cards we show off that has a very specific action window it can be used in. In this case, we're in the resource phase, and this says resource action. You could exhaust a noble hero you control to add 2 resources to that hero's resource pool. So if I had this card, I wouldn't be able to play it, number 1, because I don't have any leadership heroes. However, Morten does. If he wanted, he could exhaust Denethor or Theodred and get 2 resources on them by playing this card. So you could also take any just general actions you wanted.
We can exhaust Barrow to choose a player, and that player draws 2 cards, limit once per round. So we could do that now if we have some sort of combo piece that we're really looking to draw into right away. Of course, that means she won't be available for the rest of the round, but that's the kind of thing you will have to learn when to take these actions.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So if it just says action with no preceding word, any of these green steps that you see throughout the round sequence, you can use that card. So after you have taken all actions that you wanted to take during this green action window, you move on to the second phase, which is the planning phase.
And there we have a special action window where we can actually play allies and attachments. And keep in mind that this is the only action window where allies and attachments can be played without the help of events. So we can use our resources here to pay for various cards. You can also play events and other actions in this phase if you want to. You're not limited to allies and attachments. But the most important thing here to keep in mind is that, as Chad mentioned before, you do need a resource match to play something. And if the card is neutral, then you can, of course, pool resources from heroes across different spheres. So you don't need to assemble 5 resources on one hero to play a Gandalf. You can take them from different heroes. You can also pool resources from heroes of the same sphere to play a card, like if you want to play a self-preservation, for example, which costs 3 lore resources, then I can take from both Denethor and Barrow. In terms of specific planning actions, we do not have a lot of them, but there are a few examples on the table here. We have Frodo Baggins from the Mountain of Fire box, who has a planning action that you can exhaust the One Ring to add 1 resource to a hero's pool. The other example is the Wild Stallion, which can be attached to an ally during the planning phase as a planning action. But besides that, you can play all kinds of actions, allies, and attachments in this phase.
Yep. One other thing I wanted to add is there's also a couple heroes that let you play allies outside of this phase. Hirgon's an example. But for the most part, you're absolutely right, Morten. This is when you get your allies on the table. This is when you get your attachments on the table. And player order is going to matter here. So if Morten wanted to use Barrow to let me draw 2 cards, he'd want to do it during my turn. So I could draw those 2 cards and potentially put one of them into play. The way this phase works is player 1 takes all of their planning actions and plays all their attachments and allies they want to play, and then when they're done, they basically pass, and now it's player 2's turn to go. And so that's why if Morten said, "Hey Chad, draw 2 cards," if I drew something like an attachment I wanted to put into play, I couldn't because my turn has already passed. So if you have any cards that affect other players, passing resources, drawing cards, you want to make sure you trigger those events before the player starts playing. Let's each take our planning actions. So I'll go first. For the sake of this example game, we're going to add 5 resources to each of our heroes, just so we can afford to pay for things as the game progresses. So each hero is going to have 6 resources.
It's super easy mode.
Super easy, ultra easy mode. So I am going to spend 2 of my spirit resources, and I'm going to play this Unexpected Courage on Barivore on Morten's side. Normally I would not be able to play that card on turn 1 because I'd only have 1 spirit resource. This allows Morten to decide if he wants to use Barivore to draw 2 cards, have myself draw 2 cards, and then he could ready Barivore to use her during the game. The other...
Here's actually a genuine rules question, chat. Can I use Barivor's action during your turn in the planning phase?
Yeah. Yeah, because you have a general action here. And since it's a green action window, all players can play events and take actions as long as it's a legal action. So you wouldn't be able to take a quest action or a combat action, but a general action you could do right now. For example, I have feint that says combat action, so I couldn't do a feint right now. Not that I'd want to, but yes, you can take general actions during the planning phase green action window. Even though it's my turn. That's what you're asking.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. I think I'm going to not spend the 4 resources to play a Northern Tracker because I want to keep a resource for a Test of Will, which will allow me to cancel a when revealed effect. And then all my other tactics resources can't be spent because they're all on actions that don't make any sense. So my turn is done, and I will pass to Morten.
I will begin by paying 2 to play Steward of Gondor because we need even more resources, I guess. And that one has an action, and I can use that right now. So I will just go ahead and give myself 2 resources. And then I will pay 1 resource to play a Snowborn Scout. And he has a response after Snowborn Scout enters play. Choose a location, place 1 progress token on that location. So I will go ahead and add a progress token to the Brownlands. And that means that we have successfully explored the Brownlands. Even though it's not the questing phase, we still added the required number of progress tokens. So that means that it clears. So that saves us from having to deal with 5 threat in the staging area.
Very nice.
I will also add a self-preservation to Denethor, which says attached to a character, an action, exhaust self-preservation to heal 2 points of damage from attached character. And I could trigger that now, but that would not make any sense because Denethor has not taken any damage. And then I think I will actually keep my resources from now, unless you want some cards with Lorien's Wealth, chat, because we could actually use that one right now.
Well, yeah, but then I already took my turn, so I wouldn't be able to play those cards.
That's true, but you could draw into some nice events to help with questing or combat or something like that.
Sure, sounds good.
But let's keep that for now.
Okay. Yep, so that's a perfect example of somebody not playing an event that could have maybe helped the player that already took their turn. So that's why the turn order really matters. Okay, so once both players or all players in the game have taken all their planning actions and put out their allies and attachments, you move on to the next phase, which is the quest phase. The quest phase, the very first thing you do is each player, starting with the first player, simultaneously exhausts any heroes and allies they want to commit to the quest. So the way it actually looks is like this. If I wanted to commit Thalon and Eowyn, they each would exhaust at the exact same time. Now, for counting purposes, a lot of people do it like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, plus Thalion's 1, 5. But in actuality, they're all supposed to exhaust at the exact same moment. This is really important because of certain characters that show up later in the game. For example, For example, later in the game, you get a character called Furial, and she says response, after she commits to the quest, look at the top card of the encounter deck, and then you may discard the looked at card. This is important because she would commit to the quest the same time your other characters do, and you're not allowed to basically do it like this. Exhaust Furial, look at the top card, figure out how much willpower you're going to need or what's going to happen. Maybe you don't want to exhaust characters, and then keep committing after you see that card. That is incorrect. It's like this. You commit them all at the exact same time, see what the card is, and then decide what to do with her ability. So I am going to send 5 willpower to the quest.
And I will send 3.
Morten, you have a character that has a response.
I have indeed. Theodred has a response saying, after Theodred commits to a quest, choose a hero committed to that quest. Add 1 resource to that hero's resource pool. And you seem to be a little low on spirit resources, chat, so I think you should give that to Eowyn.
Very good. Now, next turn, when Morten goes first, he will not be able to give resources to me because I will not have committed characters to the quest yet. We'll cover that when we get to the next turn. There's another card we should talk about at this point. Leadership Aragorn from the core set. He has a response. After Aragorn commits to the quest, spend a resource from his resource pool to ready him. So this is an immediate response. So if I committed Aragorn to the quest, I would spend that resource and ready him. And then he's ready to handle anything that happens later. You cannot wait till after staging to spend that resource to ready him. You have to do it immediately. Now, Morten, let me ask you something. Do you want to ready Barivor? Because when you're committing characters, it's green. You actually have an action, and you could trigger Unexpected Courage, because sometimes there's treacheries that affect exhausted characters.
I think I will go ahead and do that. And then I can ready her. We could also add here that Eowyn has a relevant action here, which we could trigger now. Discard 1 card from your hand to give Eowyn +1 willpower until the end of the phase. This effect may be triggered by each player once each round. So we could do that now, but we could also wait and see what the encounter deck throws at us, and if that's necessary to trigger. Yep. What do you say, Chad?
Yeah, let's wait. That's a really good point, because you can modify your willpower after you've done staging, which is what we're going to do right now. And that's actually a pretty smart move to wait. So you can see exactly what you're up against and then try to modify your willpower accordingly. But it's very good to trigger actions that let you ready characters in case you get an unexpected attack during the quest phase or deal a damage to each exhausted character. Exhausted characters can't ready. There's all kind of effects that can hurt your characters during the staging step. And during the staging step, as you can see, it's red. So you can't trigger general actions like Unexpected Courage. So getting your board state ready prior to staging is very important. All right, so I have sent 5. You have sent 3. I have Thalon, who says, while he's committed to the quest, deal 1 damage to each enemy as it is revealed by the encounter deck. Uh-oh. Necromancer's Reach. Deal 1 damage to each exhausted character. That's why you want to ready your characters, if you can, prior to revealing cards during the staging step. So right now, that would deal 2 damage to my heroes and 1 damage to Theodred. Is that worth canceling? Because I could spend 1 spirit resource to cancel that when revealed effect.
And you can that because it's not an action, right? It's a response.
Absolutely.
Because right now we cannot play actions.
That's right. I think I'll just let the damage slide through. All right, that was my card. We're revealing 1 card per player. All right, let's reveal Morten's card. It is a Borg. Since Thalon's committed to the quest, it takes a damage. There's no when revealed effect. Staging is now over. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 threat in the staging area. And we have committed a total of 8. It is at this moment we could add more willpower if we wanted to via Eowyn's ability. If I wanted to discard a card, we could add an additional willpower. If Morten wanted to discard a card, we could add additional willpower. But let's talk about Sneak Attack Gandalf for a second.
It's a wonderful combo where we, for one leadership resource, can play sneak attack, which is an action, so it means that we cannot do doing staging. But it says put one ally card into play from your hand at the end of the phase. If that ally is still in play, return it to your hand. So I pay 1 and play Gandalf. And Gandalf has a response. After Gandalf enters play, I can choose to either draw 3 cards, deal 4 damage to one enemy, or reduce your threat by 5. So at this moment, I could sneak attack Gandalf in, add extra damage to the walks, thereby killing them, which would remove 2 threat from the staging area. So before we make up, after the cards have been added, but before we assign progress, we can actually remove enemies from the staging area with this combo.
The thing is, though, Gandalf would not be committed to the quest.
Nope.
So then at the end of the phase, he would come back into your hand. So you wouldn't actually be using any of his stats. But you would like...
And that would be a shame.
Yeah, that would be a shame. So you could sneak in Gandalf at the beginning of quest phase and perhaps kill the Dol Guldur orcs that were already there, then commit him to the quest, and his 4 willpower would have been part of our willpower that we committed. What's interesting to note here is Gandalf's response says after Gandalf enters play. Let's compare Gandalf's text to ally Galadriel, which says response after you play Galadriel from your hand. Search the top 5 cards. Okay, here's the big difference, and this is a question that gets asked a lot. Gandalf can work with sneak attack because he says response after Gandalf enters play. It doesn't matter how he entered play, it's just that he enters play. So in this case, he's entering play from an event. The event is playing Gandalf. Galadriel, on the other hand, says after you play Galadriel from your hand, meaning you would have to actually spend the 3 resources and play it from your hand. You cannot get her in through an event or through other card effects like Vilya, the ring of that Elrond wears. You have to actually spend 3 resources and get her in. There's no way to cheat her into play. And that's an important rule clarification that a lot of people ask. So the key takeaway here is you have enters play versus after you play from your hand. Okay, so Morten is not going to sneak in Gandalf because we quested successfully. We actually make 2 progress. Are you going to discard any cards so we make another progress?
I don't think so at the moment, no.
Yep.
I'll hold on to them.
Me too. We quested successfully. All right. So we compared our willpower to the threat, and we have now added progress. We would have another action window here. So, for example, if you wanted to let me or yourself draw cards, do you want to use Beravor at this time, or do we need to keep her up to handle some combat?
I think it would be a good idea to leave her for combat, but I could pay 3 resources to play Lorien's Wealth. If you want some cards, chat.
Sure.
And I can play that because it's an action, and it says choose a player. That player draws 3 cards.
All right, I got Beorn. I got 3 allies. So no event, so these allies I won't be able to do anything with until the next planning phase. Okay, so then we would move on to the travel phase, but we don't have any locations to travel to. However, the travel phase still happens. So we don't travel anywhere, but then there is another action window if for some reason you had a character that had a limit once per phase ability. You could...
And there are also certain actions that can only be used in the travel phase, but they are mostly related to locations anyway.
That's right. So that was an easy travel phase. Now we move on to one of the more complicated phases in the game, the encounter phase. The first part of the encounter phase says each player, starting with the first player, has the option to engage one enemy from the staging area. The engaged enemy is moved in front of the player. So what we're going to do here is you're going to take an enemy and remove it from the staging area. In doing so, you remove the threat. So the way the threat works in this game, it's supposed to be enemies in the staging area are a looming threat, a threat in the distance that you're somewhat aware of. But then when your threat is equal to or greater than the threat of the enemy, in this case the wargs is 20, and my threat is 27, the wargs have found me. Sauron's eye is on me as far as these wargs are concerned, and they can come and attack me. But the hill troll is a 30 threat enemy. He's off in the distance. I'm not worried about him yet. But if I wanted to, I could optionally engage the hill troll. But that would be pretty risky. He's attacking for 6. It's also this phase that a lot of the discussion happens in the game. So this is where you figure out who's going to engage which enemy, who's going to defend it. Basically, how the heck are you going to handle combat?
And maybe a note here, chat. You said that you could optionally engage the hill troll even though it has a higher threat than our current threat. But you can also optionally engage one of the smaller enemies if you want to pull them away from one of the other players. If one of the other players cannot handle a specific enemy, you can make sure to take it from the other player.
That's right. That's right. So we have the wargs, and they have a pretty nasty effect. So if they're dealt a shadow card with no effect, it returns to the staging area, making it hard to kill. So I have a feint, so we can guarantee that that's not going to happen. So it doesn't matter which one of us takes the wargs, feint works across the table. So we're going to get engaged by the orcs, the wolf rider, and the wargs.
And we should perhaps also mention that each player can only optionally engage one enemy.
That's right.
So even if you have one player who's all geared up for fighting, that player cannot just take all the enemies. You only get to optionally engage one.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So how about you optionally engage the wargs?
Will do.
I'll optionally engage the Dol Guldur orcs. And that's it. We can't optionally engage anymore. So then we have an action window. It's at this point we could take another action if we wanted to. I don't have any actions to take place right now. Do you?
Nope.
Even though you could sneak in Gandalf and kill.
I could,
but that
would still be in the encounter phase, so we could still not use his stats if we did that.
That's right. You could sneak in Gandalf. He could do 4 damage to an enemy, but then he would go back into your hand at the end of the phase. Once again, not using his stats. Absolutely right. So then, for each player, starting with the first player, an engagement check is made against all enemies in the staging area. And here's how that works. Each enemy's engagement value, from highest to lowest, is compared to the current player's threat level. So that's me. If the engagement value is less than or equal to the current player's threat level, the enemy engages the player. This is done by moving the enemy in front of the player. So we're going to look at the highest first. That's the hill troll with 30 threat. My threat is 27, so he's not going to engage me. So then it moves to Morten.
And as my threat is 26, it will not engage me either.
So the hill troll stays up in the staging area. Then we move to the next highest threat enemy, which is the wolf rider. His engagement is 10, minus 27. He does engage me. If there was a second wolf rider in the staging area, engagement checks alternate between players until all enemies in the staging area that can be engaged have been engaged. So if there was a second wolf rider, we would alternate over to Morten, and he would have to engage that second wolf rider. If the wolf rider's engagement was 27, for example, Morten would not engage it because his threat is 26. It would then come back to me, and since my threat is 27, I would have to engage that second wolf rider. So the player with the highest threat can sometimes engage a whole lot of enemies, and the other player literally can't engage them because they only can optionally engage one. And at the end of this phase, we once again have another action window if we wanted to take an action.
Okay. As for the other phases, there are a few actions that are specific for the encounter phase. Take no notice, where you lower the cost to play Take No Notice by 1 for each Hobbit or Ranger hero you control. And this card has action, add 5 to each enemy's engagement cost until the end of the round. So that one can be used to temporarily boost an engagement cost above the threshold, so you don't have to deal with the enemy this phase or this round. But one thing you should notice about this card is that it can be played outside of the encounter phase. So you don't have to save it for this specific phase.
That's right. Yep, it's really helpful against an enemy like the Hill Troll. If you're not ready to engage it and your threat's at 30, you could play this card, and now his engagement is 35, buying you one more round to not have to engage the Hill Troll.
So this event here called Arrows from the Trees, you can only play after making engagement checks. And the text reads, encounter action. If no enemies were engaged this phase, deal 1 damage to each enemy in the staging area. And then the players as a group may spend 3 tactics resources to deal 2 additional damage to each enemy in the staging area. Now, we wouldn't be able to play this card in this situation as we have engaged enemies, but it's just a good example of a card that manipulates the engagement of enemies, and that can only be played in the encounter phase.
All right, so the first thing that happens during the combat phase is each enemy gets dealt a shadow card, and you go in the order of the highest threat enemy first. In my case, they both are 10, so it doesn't matter. And then you go to the second player's enemies, and you deal a shadow card. This is a face-down card that could have an effect that makes the attack harder to handle. Now during step 1 of the enemy attacks phase, you have a green action window here. The whole phase is green. So that means we can do actions. And this is where you want to trigger your combat events, any tricks you have to try to minimize the damage from the attacks. So in this case, I'm engaged with 2 enemies, and I only have 1 character ready. Morten, do you have any Sentinel characters?
Nope, I do not.
All right, so Morten can't defend for me. So this is where I'm going to want to use some tricks. I have Feint. That means I can stop an attack from happening. So I'm going to spend 1 tactics resource. It's a combat action. And I'm going to stop the attack from the Dol Guldur orcs. So that means this attack is not going to happen. All right. Now we come to a little bit of a dilemma. It would have been nice to use Quick Strike right here. Exhaust a character you control to immediately declare it as an attacker and resolve its attack against any eligible enemy target. I could spend 1 tactics resource, exhaust Legolas, who has ranged. Range lets me attack characters engaged with other players. And I could kill this warg. And then we don't need to worry about the forced effect, which could throw the warg back up into the staging area. However, unfortunately, I still have the Wolf Rider engaged with me. And I don't have any way to defend it. Because Morten doesn't have any Sentinel characters, I would have to take this attack undefended, which would deal 2 damage to a hero. I don't want to worry about that, so I will spend 1 tactics resource, exhaust Legolas to attack for 3, killing the Wolf Rider. And now my defending phase is done and play passes to Morten.
Okay. So now I have to declare a blocker. And I want to throw the Snowborn Scout in front of the walks, so I hope that I can give the remaining 3 damage, deal the remaining 3 damage that I need to kill it. But it depends on whether there's a shadow effect on the shadow card underneath the walk here. So if we flip it, you flip. Oh, yeah, no shadow effect, so the Snowborn Scout dies. And the forced effect on the walk's trigger, they are returned to the staging area.
And in case you don't know what the shadow effect is, you can see the line here on the wargs. Any text underneath that line is a shadow effect. And the Banks of the Anduin, as you saw, did not have that line and therefore no shadow effect. Here's another rules question that gets asked a lot. Sometimes people ask, if you reveal a treachery as a shadow card, do you need to do the effect on the treachery card? And the answer is no. When you're revealing a shadow card, literally the only thing you're looking at is the text underneath this line. The rest of the card might as well be considered blank as far as the shadow effect goes. So even if it's a treachery, You don't trigger any of the effects on the treachery. You only trigger anything that is below the shadow effect line.
Yeah, now it would be nice if I could spend my 2 heroes to kill off the Dol Guldur orcs, but unfortunately Denethor and Beriavor, they do not have ranged, so I cannot attack enemies engaged with chat. So we just have to leave them there for the next round.
That's right. So,
however, since both of them are ready, we might as well use their actions before we go to the refresh phase. Because, yeah, it's basically free actions now, right?
Yep.
So I can exhaust Denethor to look at the top card of the encounter deck. So I exhaust Denethor to look at the top card of the encounter deck. You may move that card to the bottom of the deck.
Here it is.
Okay. That would be nice to send to the bottom. I think that would be pretty brutal, and we have enough enemies as it is. I also still have Beriavor ready, and since we have not used her action yet in this round, I can exhaust Beriavor to choose a player that draws 2 cards, and this is limited to once per round. So I will draw 2 cards for myself, since you got the Wealth of Lorien.
Yep.
And that's it for me in the combat phase. I did not draw any actions I could play.
Very good. And we should say we didn't use Sneak Attack Gandalf again during the combat phase because you would hopefully use some of his stats. Even though you could have killed the wargs with a Sneak Attack Gandalf, Gandalf would have just been sitting there doing nothing. That's not ideal. All right, so then we move on to the final phase of the round, which is the refresh phase. So what you do is all cards are readied. Each player's threat is increased by 1. And then the first player token is passed to the next player on the left. And then you have an action window. There are a couple cards that have refresh actions. For example, Lore Aragorn says reduce your threat to your starting threat level. Since this action window happens at the end of the phase, you would actually raise your threat for the end of the round effect before you could use Aragorn, which means if you're going into the refresh phase with 49 threat, you would hit 50 and therefore lose before you could trigger Aragorn. So the most threat you can have is 48 before you go into the refresh phase to use Aragorn's ability. Also, another card is Peace and Thought. Refresh action, exhaust 2 heroes to draw 5 cards. And this is also where it's important to notice that the action window happens at the end of the refresh phase. If you remember, Morten had Denethor and Beriavor still ready at the end of combat, so therefore they could have been ready going into the refresh phase. However, he would have already had to ready his heroes before he could play Peace and Thought. The readying happens before you're allowed to play any cards that have refresh action. Once players have taken any refresh actions they want to take, the round is over and you start the next round. All right, let's begin round 2. So we're in the resource phase. So the first thing we're going to do is add a resource to each of our heroes' resource pools. And then each player draws a card. And then we have a player action window. Morten, is there any actions you want to take?
I will exhaust Spirit of Gondor and add even more resources to the pile on Theodred.
All right, we move on to phase 2, where each person in player order has a special action window, and the whole phase is green, so you can take player actions at any time. Morten, you're first player. What are you going to do?
I am going to take a resource from Denethor, play Protector of Lorien on Beriavor. Since I got the Unexpected Courage from you last round, we can both quest with her and ready her for other uses. So I think that will be a good fit for Protector of Lorien.
Sounds good.
And perhaps we would of course like to put the Forest Snare on the troll, but it has to go on an enemy engaged with a player. And I do feel it would be a bit overkill to add it to the Dol Guldur orcs. That is the only thing I want to do.
Okay, sounds good. On my turn, I'm going to pay for Beorn. I have to use tactics resources to pay for Beorn. And I'm going to put in a Northern Tracker, and I have to use spirit resources for that. I can't mix and match. If it's a spirit card, I have to spend only spirit resources. And then I'll also put in the Gondorian Spearman. And that is my turn. Okay, if we have no more player actions, we move on to the quest phase. It is at this moment, during this action window, that Morten could sneak in Gandalf, trigger one of the effects like dealing the damage to the troll, and then he could commit Gandalf to the quest. So we would actually get a use out of his stats. We've decided to use Gandalf during combat, but this is when he could sneak Gandalf in. All right, Morten, you're first to commit to the quest.
I will send Bearable for 2, and what do you say? Let's go ahead and add Theodred as well for 3.
Yep. And you have, when he commits to the quest, you choose the hero committed to the quest. So you can
we
choose
add a
Bearvor
resource.
or Theodred. All right, you chose Bearvor. Now it's my turn. I'll commit 4, 5, and call it good. So I'm committing 5. Okay, we've committed a total of 8. There's 3 in the staging area. We each reveal a card. The first card is the Eastern Crows. It does have Surge, however, I have Thalon. Thalon does a damage as an enemy is revealed. So it actually happens before the enemy is fully revealed, which means the Surge does not trigger. The crows die, and the Surge does not happen. Thank you, Thalion. That was card number 1. Card number 2 is the Necromancer's Pass, a location. 3 threat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to R8. We make 2 more progress, and we have ways of boosting the willpower. Sorry, I could discard a card to Eowyn to boost it by 1 more. Morten could discard a card to Eowyn to boost it by 1. You got any other tricks, Morten?
Well, I also have the Protector of Lorien, so I can also discard cards to give Bearable even more.
True. And you took a risk. You did not use Unexpected Courage to ready Bearvor before the quest phase started. So if we had revealed a Necromancer's Reach that deals 1 damage to each exhausted character, Bearvor would have taken a damage. So it's always a good rule of thumb. If you can ready a character before you reveal your cards in staging, you probably should.
Well, since we actually do have an action window before applying the progress, I could go ahead and do it now, just before the progress is added.
All right. Do we want to discard cards and make it 4 more progress, or are we going to call it good?
We need a total of 8 to progress, so that will be a lot of cards at this point.
Okay.
I think we would be better off waiting for another round. What do you think, Chad?
Yep, let's wait. Okay, 1 more card that can help you with gaining willpower is Ally Faramir. It says exhaust Faramir. Choose a player. Each character controlled by that player gets +1 willpower. This is another card that you can wait till this moment to exhaust to gain the willpower boost. You don't need to do that before staging. Morten, you have a card that combos really well with Faramir, if you want to throw it out there.
Are you talking about Ever Vigilant?
Yep.
Yeah, here you go.
So the way Ever Vigilant works, choose and ready 1 ally card. So you could wait till after staging, exhaust Faramir, boost all the characters' willpower by 1 player, play Ever Vigilant, ready Faramir, and then exhaust him and do it again, getting a double boost out of Faramir. Pretty slick combo.
And yet, on the other hand, Chad, I guess it's worth mentioning that you could not use the same strategy to commit a character to the quest twice. You can only, for example, if we had gone ahead and sneak attacked Gandalf in, we could not commit him, then ready him with Ever Vigilant, and then commit him again.
That's right. Yeah, you can only commit characters once, but you can trigger abilities multiple times if it says you're allowed to. Whereas Bearvor, since you only can do it once a round, there's no way to get around that. Alrighty, so I placed the progress. Now it's the travel phase. To travel there, the first player must discard 2 cards from his hand at random to travel there. There is a nice card that negates that, Thor's Map. You can exhaust Thor's Map, choose a location in the staging area, make it the active location without having to trigger any of those effects because you're not traveling there. But we don't have Thor's Map. Morten, you feel like discarding 2 cards?
I would really rather not, because we have both the sneak attack, the Gandalf, and the forest snare that are pretty important to our strategy. So I'll pass on this.
All right, and ultimately it's the first player's choice. So in this case, I agree, but if it ever comes down to discussion, the first player gets the final say. Alrighty, so now we enter the encounter phase. So we each can choose and engage one enemy from the staging area. Morten is going to choose the hill troll. And then I'm going to choose the wargs. Okay, very good. If we had any player actions we wanted to take, we could do it right now. We're going to wait. And now we progress to the combat phase. So we deal a shadow card to each enemy. Highest engagement first. All right, Morten, how are you handling this troll?
Well, I think it's time to pull the good old sneak attack and Gandalf. And then go ahead and deal the 4 damage to the troll.
He is not immune to player card effects, so you can do that.
I will go ahead and block with Gandalf.
All right, Gandalf has 4 defense. The troll's attacking for 6. The shadow card is nothing.
So he gets 2 damage.
All right, on my side, I'm going to defend with the Gondorian Spearmen against the wargs that are attacking for 3. When the Gondorian Spearman is declared a defender, I deal 1 damage to the attacking enemy. All right, let's see what the shadow is. The defending player chooses and returns 1 exhausted ally he controls to its owner's hand. If he controls no exhausted allies, raise his threat by 3. This is really bad because the Gondorian Spearman is my only exhausted ally, and there is no action window when you need to resolve a shadow effect. Some shadows just say attacking enemy gets +1, and then there's an action window to deal the damage. But the actual resolving of a shadow effect, you have to do that before you can take any other actions. So I have to return my only exhausted ally to my hand. This now means this attack is undefended. That really stinks. So 3 damage is going to go somewhere. It's going to have to go on Legolas. I have to apply it to a hero. Okay, the Dol Guldur orcs are attacking for 2. 2 against the 2 defense of the Northern Tracker. This shadow says remove 1 progress token from the current quest, 3 if undefended. Okay, 2 attack against 2 defense. I take no damage. All right, time to attack back.
We will do an ever vigilant first of all, so that we can choose and ready 1 ally. So Gandalf is ready for action. And then we can go ahead and pay 2 more to play for Gondor. So until the end of the phase, all characters get +1 attack. Furthermore, all Gondor characters also get +1 until the end of the phase. We could have played that earlier, so that the Spearman would have had 1 more defense, but it wouldn't have made much difference anyway.
Yep, he would have died anyway.
So now we can attack the troll for 5 for Gandalf, 3 with Bearable, that's 8, and 10 with Denethor. So we exhaust everyone. That is 10 against 3 defense. So we add 7 damage to the hill troll and it dies.
Very good. And I had Legolas with ranged if you even needed a little more. Hill troll is dead. Okay, my characters are boosted as well from the 4 Gondor. So Beorn is attacking for 4. 4 against 1 defense on the wargs, does 3 damage, killing it. And then Legolas attacks for 4, which is enough to kill the Dol Guldur orcs. His response triggers, placing 2 progress on the quest.
And now we're at the end of the combat phase, which means that Gandalf has to come back to hand because he was sneak attacked.
That's right. And then we move on to the refresh phase. So we refresh all the cards we control. I raise my threat to 29.
And I'll raise mine to 28.
And then the first player token passes to me. And then we could take any more actions. All right, very good. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this run through of how to use your action windows and some of the common rule questions that get asked. Morten and I are happy to answer any other rule questions to the best of our ability, and if we don't know the answer, we will go out and find it. Please comment below if you have a rules question or a common rule mistake you see made that maybe would be good for a second video. Morten, is there anything you wanted to say before we go?
Yeah, just one final thing. Looking at your hand chat, I can see you have a hasty stroke in there. Why didn't you use that for the to save the spearman?
You're right. The hasty stroke could have stopped that shadow, cancel a shadow effect just triggered during combat, and I wouldn't have had to take 3 damage on Legolas. Well, the answer is I forgot I had it, which happens a lot in this game. It's very easy to forget you have answers to effects and cards in your hand. So a hasty stroke is a response, not an action. So when that shadow was revealed, in response to the shadow, I could have spent 1 resource off of Eowyn to cancel that shadow effect. The spearman would have died, but I wouldn't have had to do 3 damage to Legolas. So that was my mistake. Thanks for bringing it up now after the fact.
You're welcome. Besides that, I don't have anything else to add. I think, yeah, it's easy to forget rules or mess up rules, even if you've played this for a long time. So I hope people have some more questions to ask, and we'll have a look at them.
Sounds good to me. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and make sure to check out Cardboard of the Rings on all the various social medias, the podcast, the Facebook, the Discord, the Twitters. Until next time, happy questing. Bye-bye.